Hi guys, this is Bill with Media Unlocked, and we're back at 3.0 looking at the second of our Canon EOS-R menu videos. In this video, we're going to take a look at our playback options, our wrench options, and our customizable options. I think you're going to have a little more fun with this one than the last one because this is, frankly, the most customizable camera I have ever seen. And it's something that you're going to have a lot of fun playing with to set it up exactly the way you want to. Having said that, in the playback menu, there's not a lot that I'm going to change, partially because, well, I don't do a lot of in-camera post-production. I let my post-production software do that for me. I'm not interested in print orders or photo book setup and using my camera to do that. That's what I have a computer for. It's much easier in the computer. The only thing in here is rotating the image. Sometimes I'll set that up just so that I don't have to, when it plays back, when it comes back, if I shoot portrait mode, I'll have to tip the camera. It gives me a bigger return on that particular image. If we shift over to our next screen, again, cropping, resizing, things like that. Well, again, I do that in post-production software, so I'm not really worried about doing that in camera. Play with it if you like to. On this particular page, the only thing I really play back that much is with the highlight alert. I like the highlight alert because I call it the blinkies. If you have blown out your pixels, it flashes in your viewfinder. That gives you a chance to reshoot the image because I don't always notice when I blow out my pixels, but I don't like it in my post-production. Playback Grid, that's kind of cool. It gives you an option for things like the rule of thirds, a 6x4 grid, or this thing here with the 3x3 plus the diagonal so you can work on your leading lines. If you're into composition and you don't see that in your mind, so to speak, it's a good idea to set that up in your viewfinder. Again, I leave the vast majority of these just set to default for exactly that reason. Let's go to the wrench menus for a while. Select folder, leave it as a default, don't do anything there. File numbering continuous. Now this is something that's kind of important, at least it is to me. If you have it set to continuous, your file numbering system is going to come out as different camera numbers. When you pull your SD card, put a new card in or whatever, it continues your numbering system that you've been using all along. If, however, you set it to auto reset, every time you reset your SD card, it starts off with 0001 again. Sooner or later, you're going to wind up with a lot of files with the exact same name. I don't like that. So again, I leave it to continuous on purpose. File name gives you a chance to change your basic file names. It defaults, in this camera's case, to 1D8A, and then it would give me the file number 0001. I might put, for example, my subject's name or my name under user setting and change it over to it. Gives you some more options there. Auto rotate for computer or camera. If you set it to on, again, your playback feature is going to give you a bigger image because you're going to have to rotate the camera to see a portrait orientation. Formatting your card. I'm not going to go through this menu because, well, if I click any farther than this, it's going to format the card I've got in here, and I don't want that to happen. But that's how you clear your card for the next photo shoot. Moving on, eco mode and power saving. I always leave those set to their factory defaults. Now, a lot of people have talked about the battery life of this camera, and we're going to talk about that in our review video. But I haven't had any issues, so I'm just going to leave them for the factory default. Display brightness, again, I leave it in the middle. It gives me a good medium, and that way I don't have to worry about whether my image is dark or light. Display color tone, again, leave it to standard. Set your time, set your language to English or Spanish or whatever it is that you're looking for. Video systems, you should leave it for NTSC. Touch control standard, I like my beeps. When you hit your focal point, for example, when it's in focus, you hear that beep, and that tells me that it's time to fire. Battery info. This is kind of an interesting screen. You see that my battery has 55% left. I've got 34 images on this particular battery wrap, And recharge performance, this is cool. As batteries age, of course, they do have less recharge performance. You'll see these gradually drop off as your battery gets older, or if it's not working the way it should. A lot of people have had issues with third-party batteries. This is one of the ways that you can check. Sensor cleaning, I'm not going to do that right now because it would change everything that we're working. But a sensor cleaning, what it does is causes micro vibrations in your sensor, shakes the dust around, lets the dust fall right off of your sensor. HDMI resolution, HDMI HDR output, those ones you should play with if you're shooting HDR. Moving into our next screen, shooting info display, lots of options. You're going to want to play with this one because it gives you different display information. Try your options, see what you like. Basically, if you don't need the information, take it out. It will give you more real estate that you can use to put something else in. But I'm going to leave it right here, right now. Your performance issues, again, smooth versus power saving. If it's smooth, you have more images in your display. If it's power saving, you have fewer images, but you get a jerky image. This is really one of those ones where it's going to be your preference into your display issues. I usually leave it to smooth because, well, the battery gives me a good battery life, so I'm really not worried about it too much. Again, power saving, you can have some interesting effects, for example, with your screen. VF display format, this gives you the size in your display. Not quite sure why you would pick one over the other. It's just a personal choice. I leave it big. Display settings, I leave it to the auto. You can set it to manual if you want to. These are the controls for what you're doing. I don't see any reason to change that. Help text size, I can see it just fine the way it is. Moving on, wireless communication settings. Now this is kind of fun. You can set up your Wi-Fi. Now I don't have any Wi-Fi enabled right now, but you can set up your passwords, all of that to automatically connect to your Wi-Fi setting. Bluetooth, same idea. You can set up nicknames, clear all of your settings, things like that. Now, two of the options that you should pay attention to here is, one of them is really interesting, is sending your images to your smartphone. You can set this using your Bluetooth settings to automatically send all of your images to storage in your smartphone. Now, some folks see that as a way to avoid the issues that you have when you have one SD card slot. Others point out that you have to have your phone on all the time, and that takes an awful lot of energy. Haven't tried it, mainly because I didn't want to get involved with that in a camera that I only had as a loaner for a month. Take a look at it if you buy the camera, try it out, see whether or not you like it, and let us know. Okay, our next setting is for the GPS device. Basically, if you set an external accessory, you have GPS data. I've got it to disabled because we don't have that accessory. Okay, moving on to our last screen. The multifunction lock. Basically, you can set up different parts of your camera and lock them so that they can't move. Useful if you're out in the field, for example, useful in a different setting. So play with it. I'm going to cancel out of it right now. Custom shooting modes. You can register clear or auto update. Custom shooting mode. You can set these up, register them and things like that within the camera. I would point out that custom shooting mode C3 is a video mode. It will automatically activate when you hit your video button. You can clear the camera settings. You can set up your copyright information to include your name and your copyright details. Really a useful feature if you're putting your work out there. Software URL gives you a quick access code. Scan it with your phone. It gives you access to the printed manual for the camera. I've got it here with the info. I like it. Certification logo display. I don't even know what this is. Face it, it's just whether or not you get which logo for the certifications. I really don't think, I don't care anyway. And you've got version 1 of the firmware. Moving on to our next menu. We've got our camera bracketing, setting up, ISO speeds, things like that coming through with this menu. This is all exposures for your camera. I like 1/3 point exposure level increments because that gives you 1/3 stops in all of your changes. You can set to 1/3 or 1/2. I like that third. I like more stops than fewer. Same thing with ISO speed settings. Between a native ISO settings, it gives you 3 options if you set it here versus the 1 stop. Bracketing auto cancel, set to on. Your bracketing sequence, 0-plus. Basically, it means that when you bracket, for example, with 3 options, which is the way I've got it set here, the first image is your natural native exposure. The next image is your underexposed version. And your third image is the overexposed version. You can switch those around any way you like. To me, it doesn't matter what the order is as long as it's consistent. I can set to 3, 2, 5, or 7 shots when I'm bracketing. I find that 3 is usually all I need unless I'm doing something really, really strange. Safety shift. Now this is kind of fun. Your safety shift deals with your priority settings. You can set for aperture, you can set for ISO. Basically, it allows the camera a little bit more control in the exposure. If you set it, for example, to your shutter aperture, it prevents under or overexposure in shutter aperture priority mode because it automatically allows that to be overridden to get you a better exposure. This is really only applicable if you're shooting in any of the program modes. If all you're doing is shooting manual, it's not going to have much impact on your life. Shutter speed, aperture, ISO speed, same thing. And if we move on, same exposure for new aperture. And if we move on, same exposure for new aperture. These are all part of like that safety shift, allowing the camera to override certain concerns. Play with it if you're shooting a lot on your program modes. You can make it better results that way. You can set your shutter speed, aperture range through these buttons here to your lowest and highest speed. I'm not quite sure why I would ever do that. I like having all of my options at any given point in time. I guess one way I might use it, for example, is to make sure that I remain under my sync speed if I'm doing nothing but studio shooting. But since I always check that anyway, I'm really not too worried about it. Moving on, I can change the direction of my dials. I can have them get bigger in a clockwise or counterclockwise turn as my preference sees fit. Customizable buttons. All of these buttons are customizable. It's just a matter of picking what you want. No worries. You just pick it and you just set it. Same thing with the dials. Same thing with the multifunction bar. Now this is the thing that most people have had the most attention to with this camera because they don't understand it. It's a new feature with Canon. You can program the multifunction bar to cover about anything that you want it to. Once you do that, you have it and you just touch one side or the other to go up or down. Moving on. You can clear the settings. Add cropping information, default erase, release the shutter without a lens. All of these things are possible with the camera. Just hit the button. Releasing without a lens is kind of fun. You can like watch the shutter move and things like that, but you're not going to get an image because you don't have any optics in front of it. Retracting lens on power off. Certain lenses, ones mainly for the future, are going to come out or in when the camera is on versus off. Retracting the lens when the power off is going to pull that lens back in. Not really a terribly useful function right now. They've got that one planned for the future. Again, adding the information. If you want that, great. Clearing all custom functions ends the entire menu system there. Our last menu, the star menu, is just a customizable menu system. You can set it up right here using as many tabs as you want, as many features as you want to put in your fastest menu selections. So if you go through the menu to change, for example, your white balance all the time, you can set up a white balance key in there to do it so that you can get to it much more quickly. One of the advantages of the Canon EOS-R is that it is probably the most customizable camera ever built. It allows you to program all of these things in as menu settings, as button settings, as dial settings. It's just a matter of what works well for you. Well guys, that's the menu for the Canon EOS-R. I hope you made it through this far, and take a look, play with the settings on your camera, and exercise that shutter finger.
You guys have made it this far. If you want to check out our newest video, it will be right here. If you want to check out the product, it will be down here. If you do happen to click on it and purchase it, it does give us a little bit of commission, and that helps me a lot keep making these videos. And of course, guys, right down below, go and leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, follow along. We'll catch you next time.